Kirk Gibson. The name alone brings up images of one of baseball's most intense competitors. But here's the thing. That same fire that made him a champion also made him one of the most confrontational figures the game has ever seen. Some called it passion, others called it downright loathsome. Today we're looking at the darker side of Gibson's career, the moments where his volcanic intensity crossed the line and sparked some of baseball's most memorable conflicts. Gibson wasn't just intense, he was a pressure cooker ready to explode at any moment. His teammates celebrated his drive to win, sure, but plenty of people on the outside saw something else. Arrogance, rudeness, and a gruffness that made him hard to be around. This wasn't just about being competitive. This was about a man whose fury sometimes burned so hot that it damaged relationships and created enemies. Let's dive into 4 of the biggest confrontations that defined his career, starting with the most recent and working our way back through his explosive history. Fast forward to 2013. Gibson is now managing the Arizona Diamondbacks, and he's in the middle of a massive on-field brawl with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Things got so out of control that Gibson himself got physically tangled up with Mark McGwire, who was coaching for the Dodgers at the time. Picture this. A manager, someone who's supposed to keep his team under control, wrestling with another team's coach in the middle of a bench-clearing brawl. It was chaos. And Gibson? He was right in the thick of it. The league didn't take this lightly. Gibson got ejected from the game, slapped with a 1-game suspension, and hit with a fine. The official reason? His pitcher, Ian Kennedy, had retaliated after a warning had already been issued, and Gibson was held responsible for the intentional actions of his club. McGwire got a 2-game suspension. The whole thing was a mess. This wasn't a player losing his cool in the heat of competition. This was a manager who couldn't control his own volcanic nature, even when his job demanded it. The same intensity that made him a legend as a player had become a liability in the dugout. But that wasn't the only time Gibson's managerial career was marked by unnecessary conflict. Earlier that same year during spring training, Gibson got into a heated public argument with Cincinnati Reds manager Dusty Baker. The issue? The designated hitter rule. Baker wanted to use the DH so his injured outfielder could still get some at-bats. Gibson refused. He insisted on playing a standard National League game without the DH, and he wasn't budging. Gibson's defense was all about the rules. He said, "We play by the rules here, that's the way it is." He claimed he'd notified the Reds multiple times, but they wanted to do it their way. The whole thing turned into a public spectacle. Baker was so upset that he reportedly refused to shake Gibson's hand afterward. Here's the problem. Gibson was technically right, but was this really a hill worth dying on? It was spring training, a time when teams are supposed to be working out the kinks and getting ready for the season. Instead, Gibson's rigid, uncompromising attitude created friction where there didn't need to be any. This is where we can pause for a second and think about Gibson's managerial style. As a player, his intensity was excused because it led to championships. But as a manager, that same fire often just created problems. He struggled to separate the competitive drive that inspired his players from the diplomacy required to deal with other teams and managers. The incidents with both McGwire and Baker revealed a deeper issue. Gibson was managing as if he were still playing, unable to adapt his confrontational approach to fit his new role. Comment below and let us know. Which of Gibson's confrontations do you think was the most intense? And if you're enjoying this deep dive into one of baseball's most complex figures, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more stories like this. Now let's rewind to 1988 when Gibson was still a player and had just joined the Los Angeles Dodgers. This is where things get really interesting, because this is where Gibson's intensity became a weapon to transform an entire team's culture. But it didn't start pretty. In fact, it started with one of the most explosive outbursts of his career. It was early in spring training, March 3rd, 1988, just before the first exhibition game. Teammate Jesse Orozco played a practical joke on Gibson, putting eye black or shoe polish in his cap. For most players, this would have been a harmless prank, something to laugh off. Not Gibson. He exploded, and we're not talking about just getting mad. Gibson stormed out of spring training entirely. He left the facility and didn't come back until the next day. When Gibson finally did speak about it, he made his feelings crystal clear. He said, "Yes, basically, I don't want to be a part of their fun and comedy act." He added, "I like to have a good time, but a good time to me is winning." Gibson made it known that this kind of unprofessional behavior was foreign to him. He emphasized that before game time, he got hyped up and didn't have a sense of humor. That much was obvious. Now here's where it gets complicated. Gibson's outburst wasn't just about a prank. It was a challenge to the entire team's philosophy. He was basically calling out the Dodgers for being too relaxed, for not taking winning seriously enough. While the exact phrase, "bunch of losers," isn't confirmed in the records, the depth of his berating was real. He wanted them to know that if they were going to win a championship, they needed to match his level of intensity and commitment. No more jokes before games. No more casual attitudes, just pure, unrelenting focus on winning. The thing is, it worked. Gibson's volcanic reaction served as a cultural shockwave that forced the Dodgers to change. They aligned their priorities with his win-at-all-costs mentality. By the end of that season, Gibson won the National League MVP award and hit one of the most famous home runs in baseball history, a dramatic pinch hit shot in Game 1 of the World Series that propelled the Dodgers to a championship. His teammate Orel Hershiser, the 1988 Cy Young winner, later said that Gibson changed all of our lives with the intensity and the priority list and the passion on a daily basis. Hershiser even said, "Without you, we don't win it." So was Gibson's outburst justified? Maybe. But it also showed a pattern: Gibson's way or the highway. He demanded total commitment, and anyone who didn't meet his standards was in for a verbal lashing. That kind of leadership can inspire a team to greatness, but it can also create resentment and division. In this case, it led to a championship, but not everyone was happy about how they got there. Now let's go back even further to 1984 when Gibson was still with the Detroit Tigers. This is where we see Gibson's intensity in its purest form, aimed not at his own team but at a rival. It's Game 5 of the World Series against the San Diego Padres. The Tigers are leading 5-4 in the 8th inning with runners on second and third. The situation screams for an intentional walk to Gibson, especially since he'd already hit a home run earlier in the game. But Padres pitcher Goose Gossage, a Hall of Fame reliever, refused. Gossage had dominated Gibson in their previous matchups. Gibson had only managed one bunt single in 10 at-bats against him, and Gossage had struck him out in his very first major league at-bat back in 1979. Gossage's pride got the better of him. He told a teammate, "I own him." He convinced Padres manager Dick Williams to let him pitch to Gibson instead of walking him. Detroit manager Sparky Anderson saw what was happening. He recognized the ego battle unfolding on the mound, so he yelled to Gibson from the dugout, "He don't want to walk you." He gave Gibson the universal baseball gesture for swing away. Gibson knew exactly what to do. Gossage threw a one-huzil fastball, and Gibson launched it deep into the right field upper deck for a 3-run home run. Game over. World Series won. Years later, during his 2008 Hall of Fame induction, Gossage turned to Williams and said with a smile, "I should have walked Gibson." That single moment encapsulates everything about Gibson's career: his intensity, his ability to exploit an opponent's weakness, and his clutch performance under the highest pressure. But it also shows how Gibson thrived on conflict. He fed off the challenge, off the disrespect, off the chance to prove someone wrong. The truth is, Gibson's early life shaped this need for confrontation. Growing up in Pontiac, Michigan, his father built a home plate and pitching mound in the backyard and pushed him relentlessly. Gibson later admitted that while he appreciated the discipline this instilled, the constant pressure almost made him hate athletics as a youth. His mother provided balance with her calm presence, but the damage was done. Gibson learned early that success meant fighting through pressure, sometimes at the cost of relationships and peace of mind. But here's where the story takes a turn. After his playing career ended in 1995, Gibson moved into broadcasting and then managing. His managerial record was decent: 353 wins and 375 losses over parts of 5 seasons. He even won Manager of the Year in 2011. But as we've already seen, his later years were marked by conflicts that showed the limitations of his confrontational style. The same intensity that worked as a player didn't always translate to management. He couldn't seem to find the balance between demanding excellence and maintaining professional relationships with other organizations. And then, in 2015, Gibson faced the toughest opponent of his life: Parkinson's disease. This diagnosis changed everything. Suddenly, the competitive fire that had fueled his baseball career had a new target. Gibson couldn't punch Parkinson's in the face or hit a home run to beat it, but he could fight it with the same mental toughness he'd used his entire life. Gibson turned to the same mental conditioning techniques he'd learned as a player: visualization, focus, and an unyielding refusal to give up. He uses these tools now to manage his illness and, perhaps more importantly, to help others. The Kirk Gibson Foundation leverages his national recognition to raise awareness about Parkinson's disease and provide funding for activity-based therapies. The foundation is even working to launch a Parkinson's Wellness Center in Southeast Michigan, set to open in 2025. This is where Gibson's story comes full circle. The same intensity that made him loathsome to some, the same volcanic fury that sparked confrontations and created enemies, has been transformed into something positive. He's no longer fighting pitchers or teammates or rival managers. He's fighting for people who are struggling with the same disease he has. The power he once used to dominate on the baseball field is now being used to advocate, to inspire, and to help. Gibson's career is a study in contrasts. He was a champion and a hothead, a leader and a bully, a legend and, to some, loathsome. But through it all, one thing remained constant: his refusal to yield. Whether it was facing down Goose Gossage in the World Series, berating his teammates in spring training, or now battling Parkinson's disease, Gibson has always fought with everything he had. And while his methods weren't always pretty and his intensity didn't always make him friends, it's impossible to deny the impact he's had on the game and on the people around him. If you found this story as compelling as we did, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into baseball's most complex figures. And if you're interested in learning more about Gibson's foundation and the work he's doing now, check out the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.